Welcome to what I hope will be a really short video on how to write an interesting encyclopedia entry. So in front of you, you have a little bit that I've extracted from Wikipedia. It's about the Hound of the Baskervilles because it ties in with what my Year 8s are doing. They have to write an encyclopedia entry about some of the characters. So the first thing I want you to notice is how this writer is having fun with adjectives. So we've got the famed Baker Street and the detective with what sort of eye? It's a keen eye. And what sort of intelligence? It's an acute intelligence. And what sort of mind? It's a logical mind. So you can see also that these have been listed in threes. So our writer is using a pattern of three, which is normally a persuasive technique, a rhetorical device, but using it to make this factual description of Holmes more interesting. He's observant and deduction personified, and although he takes a back seat to Watson for much of this particular adventure, we always feel his presence. So we've moved from the adjectives here to a strange kind of concrete noun here. This idea that Holmes is something else, of course, is a metaphor. So the person becomes a thing, deduction itself, which is the opposite of personification, isn't it? There's almost a little joke going on here. But describing Holmes in metaphor. And then we've got this use of idiom. An idiom is an expression that language users who are native to the country would use, takes a back seat. So again, that's a metaphor, isn't it? It means that he doesn't take the lead in this story, but it's done as an idiomatic metaphor. In the end, it takes all of his crime-solving powers to identify an ingenious killer. And again, we've got an adjective on ingenious. And what sort of powers are there? Here we've got a compound word, two adjectives or two words being put together to form an adjective, and to save the life of his next intended victim and solve the Baskerville mystery. So you can see from their highlighting that there's some quite creative writing going on. Another thing that this writer is doing is loading up the sentence with extra information, and that's where you get the introduction of commas each time extra information's added in. That makes for a much more interesting read, actually. Let's have a look. In the end, it takes all of his crime-solving powers to identify an ingenious killer and save the life of his intended victim and solve the Baskerville mystery. Now, normally you'll be told by your teachers not to overload the use of and. It can make your writing very boring. But I hope when I read this out that you saw these ands were being used as emphasis. You know, this is how great Sherlock Holmes is. He can do this and he can do that. And that's the impression that the writer's trying to build up. Okay, let's have a look at the description of Dr. Watson. The novel's narrator, Watson, is Holmes's stalwart assistant. There you are again, loading up with adjectives for us. I'll just move that back to yellow. At Baker Street, and the chronicler of his triumphs as a private investigator. Well, that's probably not so much an adjective, but I'll say it is because it describes investigator. He steps into Holmes's boots again. That is another metaphor, another bit of idiomatic language, that language you remember that we'd use as native speakers of English, but you'd have to know the language really well to understand what the metaphor was about. So expressing his eagerness to impress his colleague by cracking this most baffling of cases. And again, this is a really powerful verb which works again as a metaphor. A case isn't something that you can literally crack, but it's being presented as something that can be cracked. So this is a metaphorical use of the verb. And then he ends, or she ends, I don't know the gender of the person who's written this, with a nice touch here. Returns to the fray means returns to the battle or the case, but this language is deliberately old-fashioned. It's exactly the kind of language that Arthur Conan Doyle would have used in his writing. And so our encyclopedia writer has cheekily and deliberately used that same sort of language that Holmes himself or Watson himself would have used in his own or her own encyclopedia entry. So I hope that that's shown you how to get something as boring as an encyclopedia entry and have fun with it, make it quite interesting. If you go on Wikipedia and read a typical entry, it is a list of facts, which is very difficult to get excited about. But this, I think, is an improvement.